Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody who's joining in from across the world. Thank you so much for taking time out for today's session and joining me today in another new session of Insights with Upgrad is David Parrish. And before I move on to introduce this very wonderful speaker for the day, let me know if you can see hear me properly, and if you can see David. Just put a hi in the chat box if you can. Okay, can you see me? Can you hear me? Okay, thanks, Kushagra. And moving on to two very small things you need to remember for this session. For any audio and video related queries you may have, please use the chat box. If David has some interesting questions for you, and he does have breakout rooms during this session, so do use the chat box for it. If you have any questions you want David to answer in the Q&A round, do put it in the Q&A box. I'll be picking up questions from there for that. And okay, thanks Richard for joining in from Indonesia. I know it's slightly later in the day there right now, so thanks for taking time out. And I now take this opportunity to introduce our very wonderful speaker for the day. David helps creative entrepreneurs make their businesses and organizations even more successful. He works internationally as a speaker, trainer, and consultant specializing in the creative, digital, and cultural sectors. David has set up and managed enterprises in the creative industries throughout his career as an entrepreneur. After learning about business primarily from practical experience, he went later to business school, graduating with an MBA with distinction from Bradford University Management Center, one of Europe's leading business schools. Thanks so much, David, for joining us today at Upgrad and for addressing all these wonderful people willing to hear some amazing insights on strategic marketing from you.
Okay, well, thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure. I'm just very quickly launching three questions here for you to have a better understanding of our audience today, and request all of you to really just type in and just click those three buttons there to tell us what your experience is, which industry are you working in, and what's the outcome you're expecting from today's session. David, I hope you can see the live results.
I can see the poll, yeah. I can't see any results yet. I guess people are just voting right now.
Yeah, they are.
Oh, yeah.
About 60% of you voted, requesting all the remaining to very quickly type in the answers. It's just 3 clicks for you. Okay, so what I see from 70% of you is that you are either working in the IT sector or in others, and we could be talking about any industry here. A lot of you have under 5 years of experience, so that's good. We're talking to a relatively younger crowd today. And the outcome you're expecting from today's session is, how is strategic marketing effectively used across industries, and how can you upskill yourself in this domain? Great. Thank you so much. And David, over to you.
Well, thank you, Meda, for inviting me and for your kind introduction. And I'll do my best to live up to expectations today. I'm really delighted to be working with all of you, and I hope that we can create an interactive session in just 1 hour that we have. So please continue to use the chat to tell us more about yourself, where you're from, maybe which industry you're from, and anything in particular you want to learn from this session today. So keep talking to us through the chat. The session is officially 1 hour. When we finish, I'll remain online a little bit longer. So if anybody wants to chat to me individually or informally, then I won't disappear after an hour. but the session is officially 1 hour. And we've said that it'll be something like 40 minutes of presentation from me, and then 20 minutes questions, answers, and discussions. So in that part, yes, by all means, ask questions, but you can also share your perspective. And I don't mind if you disagree with me. Sometimes people say, yes, David, but in my experience, this works, or that's a problem. And so we're all learning from each other. And so I'm really looking forward to an interactive session. It's in 2 parts, and I'll talk about the content in a moment. But it might be that we have a short question and answer session at the end of the first session before we move on to the second. But please send your questions in through the chat. Meda will watch them coming in. She will interrupt me if necessary. Otherwise, she will combine them into clever questions to make sure that we cover everything at the end of the first session. But mainly, most of the questions I think will be answered in the final session before we finish. There's also a web page I've set up on my website, which is especially for this event, and it includes some additional information. So you can use that as a reference point, and Meda will share that link with you at some point during the session now, but it will remain there afterwards. So you can use it as a reference to check out things, read more about some of the things I'm going to be talking about. I should also say, by way of introduction, that I've learned a lot about marketing over many years. I'm not as young as I look. I've actually been around quite a long time, and I learned a lot initially through making mistakes. And my first business was a bookshop in my small hometown near to Manchester in England. And then I went to work in book publishing, and then I became managing director of an international book marketing and distribution company. So I learned a lot on the job. I learned through experimenting. We had some great successes. We made some mistakes, of course, and learned from them. And then it was only when I was in my 30s that I went to university for the first time to consolidate all my experience and combine it with academic learning. So I can combine both. I have lots of practical experience, plus some academic theories I can share with you and how they work together. I've been lucky enough to work in more than 50 countries around the world, so I've learned a lot about how marketing works in different countries and different cultures. And of course, we have to adapt the general principles and the stories and the examples to our own particular circumstances, into our own industries, our own cultures and countries. So that's always a challenge, but it's an interesting one. And we can be creative in the way that we do that. And finally, yeah, I've got some letters after my name. This is the title slide. There are more letters after my name than in it, embarrassingly. But as I said, I'm not primarily an academic. Most of my learning comes from real experience, but I do have credentials to give me a bit of credibility, in case you're wondering, in case you're thinking I'm just making it all up. So let me move on then to an overview of what we're going to cover today. And quite simply, only 2 main subjects, because marketing is a huge area. We could have a seminar or a boot camp for a whole week, but we have to limit it to an hour. And therefore, I've had to decide which are the most important things that we should cover. And everything I'm going to say comes under 2 headings. First is a strategic approach to marketing. And what is a strategic approach? What do we mean by that? How can we do that? And secondly, customer-centric marketing. And I'll talk about that in the second half. So moving on then to a strategic approach to marketing. And I'll cover these 3 points: strategic versus operational marketing, marketing in a competitive environment, and market positioning. So they're the headings for this first session. And I'll start by saying that the word marketing really should be banned. It shouldn't be allowed, because any word that means different things to different people is potentially confusing. And I think marketing is one of those words. I think that many people think, when I say marketing, they think of it as a fancy word for promotion and advertising and social media. Let's call that promotion, because marketing is a bigger subject than that. Of course, promotion, advertising, social media, etc., are very much part of marketing, but marketing is a huge umbrella term that covers different things. And for me, the two areas that marketing covers that we must distinguish are, on the one hand, strategic marketing, which I'm going to be focusing on today, and then secondly, what you might call operational marketing or marketing communications. And many people, when they talk about marketing, even when they do marketing, they jump straight to the second part of marketing communications or operational marketing. They want to start telling people, they want to use social media, they want to start advertising and promoting their stuff. And that's wholly understandable. But before that, we must be more strategic. We must have a master plan for how we do those things. We must decide what to do and indeed what not to do. And in that sense, strategic marketing is invisible. It's the decisions made in boardrooms and studios and offices where we decide that we're not going to advertise to certain people because they're not our target market. We're not going to use this medium because it's not the most effective one for us to reach that market. And so there are lots of decisions that are made that we never see because they're decisions not to do things. And that's kind of confusing because we see so much of marketing. As consumers, we are bombarded every day with adverts on the back of buses, on TV, on the radio, on the internet. We get social media, online news, all kinds of things. And we might get the impression that it's a free-for-all, that just more is better, that people are just using every channel to do everything they can as often as they can, because that's how it might seem to us as we receive all these marketing messages. But actually, good marketing is strategic. And in fact, we should only see the advertising and the promotion that's relevant to us. If we're getting lots of irrelevant messages or junk mail or bad marketing, then it shows that somebody's not doing their job properly. So we should be much more focused. And I'll talk about that in the second half, how we can focus on particular types of customers. But the main point here is to distinguish between strategic marketing and operational marketing. And let me describe it this way with a story. I've got lots of stories. I'll tell you as many as I can fit in. Most of them are true, a few are not true. And this isn't a true story. It's a silly story, actually, I just made up. But I hope that despite it being a silly, even stupid story, it will make a point. So here goes. There are some guys, some Europeans who go up to Greenland, to the North Pole, and they decide they're going to sell to the Eskimos, the good Inuit people of the far north. And they have this plan to sell snow to the Eskimos. This is the brilliant idea. They try to sell snow to the Eskimos, but they're not very successful because, you know, the Eskimos, they just don't want to buy this snow. So they try different methods and still they can't sell snow to the Eskimos. So they decide to call in a marketing consultant to invest some money in expert help, consultancy. And the first person who arrives is an operational marketing consultant, a consultant in marketing communications. And he looks at the situation, he realizes they're not selling any, and he says, this is the problem. I know what the answer is. This is what you must do. He says, friends, your business cards are the wrong color. you need to change your business cards. Your website needs rebranding. You need a better business name for your business and your website. And you need to use social media more, and then everything will be okay. And this is the advice of an operational marketing person, marketing communications. So they try all these things, and guess what? It doesn't work. They still can't sell snow to the Eskimos. So they sack this guy, and they demand their money back because it's stupid advice. And then they invite somebody else. And when she arrives, she's a consultant in strategic marketing. And she looks at the situation and she says, guys, this just isn't going to work. The whole strategy is wrong. You're never going to sell snow to the Eskimos. It's just an impossibility. And so you need to adjust your business strategy, your marketing strategy. And if you're dedicated on selling something to the Eskimos, maybe you could sell them gloves and hats and scarves and ear warmers. Maybe that will be more successful, because then there will be a strategic fit between what you're selling and what the customers want. Or if your mission in life is to sell snow, you're never going to sell it to the Eskimos because they have too much already. But maybe those people in Dubai who have an indoor ski slope, maybe they want to buy some snow. And then there's a connection, a strategic fit between what you're selling and what people want to buy. And maybe that will work. And so her advice is not about social media, websites, branding, business cards. It's actually about the whole business and that lack of alignment between the customer and the products or services you're selling. And although that's quite a silly story, and it makes that point. And I find that when people bring me in as a marketing consultant into businesses in the UK, or indeed many countries around the world, they expect me to give advice about better use of social media or some branding tweak. But what I find is that the problem is more strategic than that, and they're selling to the wrong customers. Okay, they're not getting it totally wrong by selling to totally inappropriate customers, but they're selling to people who can't pay what they need to pay. They're selling to people who don't quite understand. And so my job very often is to help them to find a new market. And it's as if I go to the business and lift them up and just kind of turn them around a bit and then put them down facing a different market. And then everything fits into place. So strategic marketing is about getting a better alignment between your products and exactly the right market. Not trying to sell to everybody, not trying to sell snow to the Eskimos, that's clearly stupid. But where people go wrong is they make a little mistake. They're selling to slightly the wrong people. And it's very often because they're trying to sell in a particular location that's convenient, and there isn't a market in that area. They need to move to a different district, different city, perhaps a different country. And then sometimes the strategic marketing approach is wrong because the product isn't quite right. The product needs to change in some way to be more fitting for the target market. So it's all about, it's about avoiding that mismatch and just getting things so that they're perfectly aligned. And I think that's how I would describe strategic marketing. It's about the big picture. It's really about getting the big things right before we move on to actually communicating with customers. We need to know who we're trying to communicate with, who we're not going to communicate with, and why. And all that is part of our bigger business strategy, our strategic marketing picture, which also includes a recognition of competition. So now let me talk briefly about marketing in a competitive environment. And you might be familiar already with Michael Porter from Harvard University, who talked about the 5 forces of competition. And when he talks about competition, he says that most people think of competition as their rivals. In other words, people like you with similar businesses to you doing very similar things. But he says they're simply your rivals. They're your rivals, and there is some jostling and maneuvering with those rivals. But actually, the competition is much bigger than that. And competition comes often from outside of that group of rivals. And so the 4 other forces of competition are threats of new entrants. So you might set up a business and you're doing really well, but the question is, what will stop other people coming in and doing the same? Are there any barriers to entry? And if there aren't, the chances are you're going to be a poor pioneer. You're going to develop a business, find a market, make profits, and then when other people see what you're doing and learn from your experience, they will follow you into the market. So there might be new entrants coming in. And so the question is, what barriers do you have to stop them doing it? It might be that you need a government license, like in telecommunications, and they can't just follow you in, or huge investments, like in oil mining. They can't just, they need huge amounts of money and probably a government license as well. But in many other businesses, they don't need those things and they can follow you in. So the threat of new entrants is one. Another one is the threat of substitute products. And this is where whole businesses can fail. I'm thinking of the typewriter industry. I don't know how many of you out there can remember what a typewriter was. I can just about remember. And, there were many manufacturers of typewriters. They were in competition with each other, but the real competition came from outside the world of typewriters, from word processing and the first simple computers. And now the typewriter industry doesn't even exist. And the other one, the classic one everybody talks about, is Kodak, who made film for cameras. They were the world's best company making film for cameras. Can anybody remember, films in cameras? But then digital photography came along from outside the normal world of photography. It wasn't camera manufacturers. It was some of the Japanese technology companies who got into it and did develop digital cameras. So substitute products can be a bigger competition than just your rivals. So we need to keep a lookout. And then the other 2 are the bargaining power of suppliers. So there might be a shift of power balance between suppliers and buyers within an industry. And this happened to me when the bookshops became chain bookshops in England, and they then had much more. That's more about the power of buyers. But the other 2 are the bargaining power of suppliers and the bargaining power of buyers. These are 2 sides of the same coin. And it's about that change in the power relationship, so that bookshops had very little power in relation to publishers who provided them with books, until the bookshops became chain bookshops. They had massive buying power, and then they dictated terms to the book publishers. So there was a whole shift in that industry. And that was happening while I was working in book distribution. And in fact, my MBA thesis was about the changing power structures within the book industry in the UK and internationally around that time. So we need to be aware of those larger forces of competition as outlined by Michael Porter, but we also need to work to our competitive advantage. And this is a key element in any business, to understand that you might be good at something, but if your rivals and competitors are also good, you might not have a competitive advantage. And so we have to ask ourselves 2 questions. The first one is, what are we good at? and you might be working in healthcare or IT or agriculture or anything else. And you can say, we're really, really good at this thing. And it's a question I ask when I come to you as a consultant. I will ask you what you're good at. But then I will ask you how many other people in the marketplace are also good. And this is where we need to change the question. And the second question is, what are you good at in relation to the competitors? So I've got an example in one of my books. It's about a video company. They were really good at making music videos for bands. But the problem is, so were lots of other people, and most of them were better. So in ranking terms, they were just average. But then there was some other kind of videos about social documentaries where they weren't very good. They felt they didn't have the great skills, they weren't experts. But the thing is, everybody else was even worse than them. And so they were the best in the market. So it's not what you're good at, it's what you're good at in relation to competition. And I've written about this extensively. There are online toolkits and video-based toolkits on my website that you can check out from the page I mentioned earlier. So do check that out. And then thirdly, we talk about market positioning and finding that position in the market. And once we recognize there are competitors out there, instead of trying to compete with everybody, we might find, a small area of the market where we don't really have any competition, where we can take that market segment and dominate it and make it our own. And so that's a clever strategy. It's a niche strategy. And I wrote about it in my book, and there's a case study in my first book called T-Shirts and Suits, A Guide to the Business of Creativity, where one of the businesses I interviewed, he said, find a market and make it your own. So we're not trying to compete with everybody. We're not trying to be, third or fourth best. We want to find an area where we can be world-class, where we can be the best, where we can be the go-to company, because in that specialist area, we dominate. And that's an approach I've taken, because as a marketing consultant, as a business advisor, I could advise any business. But in doing that, I'm in competition with millions of other business advisors. So if I specialize and say I'm going to work particularly with creative and digital businesses, and particularly in the area of strategic marketing, then of course that's a smaller market, but I've got rid of most of the competition. I can beat most of the competition by choosing that area where I'm a specialist. And they're not specialists, they're generalists. And so it's finding a market and making it your own. So at this point, I'm going to take a little break. And I can see that some questions and comments are coming in the chat. I haven't had a chance to read them, but I'm sure Meda is completely on top of them. So
yeah, I've responded to almost all of them.
Okay. So at this point, I'll just pause, and maybe Meda can read some questions or some of the comments or observations.
Sure. I think Abin's question that he just put is, I would like to learn more about positioning in marketing. How do you position better?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think a lot of businesses find out through trial and error. They have a theory, a hypothesis that they're going to sell, I don't know, pharmaceuticals in a certain country, or just be, a restaurant in a medium-sized town, and it's going to work. But then the reality hits them. I think Mike Tyson, the boxer, he said, everybody has a plan until you're hit in the face. And then it's not, and I think it's the same with competition in business. People set up a business, they think they're going to succeed, and then they find they have huge competition. And sometimes they simply fail. But a lot of businesses then make adjustments. They change their offering to make it different than the rivals. They realize they have a speciality. They might start off offering all kinds of web design services, but realize that people only come to them for videos. And this tells you something about the market, because clearly people are going elsewhere for simple websites or for search engine optimization, and they just can't compete. And they realize it's not working and nobody will buy from them. But they also recognize that lots of people are coming to them to make videos for websites. And if they're smart, they will react to this. And so I think a lot of choosing your positioning can be done by theorizing, by looking at the market before you do anything, just making intelligent observations, getting information, seeing what is already there and looking for a gap. So that's one thing. And then when you actually start in business, reality hits and you probably have to make some adjustments. And the market is talking to you by not buying from you, by complaining about prices. And the market also talks to you with good news. And they will come to you. It might surprise you that they're coming to you for a particular kind of food or a particular kind of marketing services or a particular kind of medicine, I don't know. And then you realize there's a gap in the market. Maybe this tells us that we are good at this and not many other people are. And the market will help you find your competitive advantage. And then with that, you can find your position in the market. So I think it's a mixture of theory and practice.
Thank you so much, David. So Alok is in the footwear business in India. And he's saying, should I not try to sell to everybody? Because currently he claims that there's no footwear like mine in India. And by footwear, do you want to, Alok, put some more emphasis on, is it leather, like one particular type? But so his question is, should I not try to sell to everybody?
I think so, for different reasons. For a small business, well, there are two things. One is, if you try to sell to everybody, it implies that you're not focused and you're going to waste a lot of money and time. You're going to spread yourself too thinly and potentially, waste a lot of money advertising to the wrong people. So if we are to use our resources of time and energy and money effectively, we need to focus it. And that's, so I think for that reason, we need to choose which customers and only try to sell to a few. I think the other point is that when you say there is, nobody else selling the footwear, that could be a big opportunity in the marketplace. You could say there's a gap in the market. But I have to say that in my first business, which I started with some friends when I was very young, and we set up a bookshop in my hometown because there wasn't a bookshop there. And we thought, there's no bookshop. So if we set up a bookshop, we are finding a gap in the market and we're going to be successful. But what we found is that there was no market in the gap. And that's the problem, that there was actually a reason why other people didn't set up a bookshop. And there may be a reason why other people aren't selling your particular kind of footwear. And so what I found out many years later at business school was that big companies do demographic analyses, and they will look at a map of my country, England, and decide which towns are big enough to support a bookshop profitably. And there might be big cities, towns and cities with universities or colleges, and with sufficient number of people with sufficient wealth to support a bookshop, and they will open bookshops in those towns. And they probably looked at my small town and decided, no, it's not going to work. So there was a reason why nobody else was selling. So I think we should be very careful. And it sounds like the footwear might be specialist, and that's all the more reason to try to work out which one or 2% of the population really want to buy this, and then focus on those people and not everybody else. So that's quite a long answer about that business, but I think it applies to most others. So I hope other people got value from listening to that.
Sure, definitely did. And Alok, let us know if that answered your question. Divyaman's question is it easier to find a niche in the industry we're working using strategic marketing?
Yeah, I think that's what strategic marketing is all about. It's about finding the niche. It's about having a big plan before you start rushing around spending money, advertising and promoting. It's about deciding where in the marketplace you're going to promote your goods, which customers are especially interested, where can you compete, where can't you compete? It's this big question. So strategic marketing is all about that. It's like looking at a map. You know, you're going to go on holiday. When you go on holiday, you're going to do a lot of eating and drinking and dancing. But before you start eating and drinking and dancing, you've got to decide where to go. You look at a map, you read the brochures, you think, yeah, there's lots of dancing there, but you know, maybe too many people. These other countries, they don't even allow drinking, so that's not good. So, you know, we are strategic before we go on holiday by choosing the right place before we start dancing and singing and eating and drinking. And I think that's the difference between operational marketing and strategic marketing. And you can imagine somebody who wants to go on holiday and they just pack their suitcase and run to the airport. And so, you know, one of their friends tells them, hang on a minute, stop, think. Let's make sure we go to a place where we can have a really good time. Let's spend a few days looking at maps and brochures and deals and on the internet and flights, and then we choose the right place. And if we choose the right place, we're going to have a good time automatically. Everything will just work. Because if we choose the right place, there will be the right restaurants with food we like, drink we like, affordable, friendly, etc. And I think that's a good analogy really with strategic marketing. If we choose the right products, sell them to the right people, avoid the competition, find a niche that we can dominate, then everything just works out smoothly. Everything's just easy. We don't need to advertise because people say, where have you been all my life? And give you a big hug and give you lots of money and love you. So, you know, what's not to like? In contrast, if we find that we're having to spend a lot of money advertising, people aren't responding, that probably tells us we've chosen the wrong place, the wrong position in the market. And so in that case, you know, we've got our strategy wrong. So if you get your strategy right by doing some thinking and some planning, when you get to the operational side, everything is easy.
Great. Neetu's question is, operational marketing is only about communication, which is promotion, advertisements. Yes, that's what David said. And the part where you actually choose communication on which platforms, which channels, which audience are you going to set that communication out to is what is strategic marketing.
Exactly. Another analogy comes to mind is, you know, you've probably seen it because in our careers and our businesses, we want to climb the ladder. And you might see a cartoon, you know, of somebody climbing a ladder and going up and up and up in the world. But first of all, you've got to make sure the ladder is against the right wall. Because if the ladder is against the wrong wall, yeah, you're going up, but you're using energy, you're getting somewhere, but actually you're getting nowhere. So choosing the right wall is super important before you start climbing the ladder. And that might be something to bear in mind for your careers, but I think it applies also to business. And choosing the right wall is strategic marketing. Once we've chosen that and we're sure, then we do the step-by-step operational marketing of advertising, promotion, communication, etc.
That's great. One question which I don't find on the Q&A box, but I could check in the chat box is how much does the segmentation technique help in case of huge populations, like in the case of India, China, right? With such huge populations in the markets, any other tools at segmenting the audience correctly?
Yeah, well, certainly we do need to segment the market. We can't just go to China or India or any other huge country and just try to sell to everybody, because we're going to waste a lot of time. So we need to segment the market, and there's no correct way to do this. It depends on your business. You can segment a market in terms of age profiles. That might be relevant to your business, it might not. You can separate according to gender. You can separate according to educational qualifications. So, if you're selling high-level educational services like master's degrees and PhDs, you probably want to, focus on people who have bachelor's degrees rather than people who have no education whatsoever. That's kind of common sense. But what we're doing there is we're segmenting the market. We're saying there are those people who already have a degree and those who don't. So that's one thing. And then of those, we might say, is there a reason why men or women would be more suitable for our business? There might be, maybe not. And then we might say, what about cultural differences? Because, we're based in a particular culture. So people who have one religion or another might be more comfortable coming to our university or buying from us. That might be another relevant way to split or segment the market. And then we have to look at who can afford us, because, maybe not everybody who wants what we have can actually afford us. So there are all kinds of different ways to segment the market so that we can focus on the right kind of customers. And then when it comes to communicating with them, which we'll talk about a bit later, we can maybe segment people according to the media that they read. So, in my country, in England, there are several different newspapers, of course, and you can almost segment people into, Guardian readers and Daily Telegraph readers, Daily Mail readers. It's a bit of a generalization and a stereotype, but the newspaper that people read, gives you some indication about their interests, their values, maybe their profession, their outlook on life. And, that's another question to ask when we're looking at segmentation. What kind of people do we want? What do they read? Where do they live? How much money have they got? And this links into something I'll mention briefly later about having personas, like imagining some typical ideal clients, sort of just inventing, so you might say our ideal client is a woman in her between 25 and 35 who has a lot of disposable income, who has a degree already, maybe speaks 2 languages, maybe is in one of the professions, and she has an interest in international travel. So that's a way of sort of putting together a fictional or ideal profile of a customer you want to sell to, because you believe that they are the ideal customers. And then you start asking questions, where are they?
And you'll be able to identify this person and create this is called persona building, or what David just mentioned. And you'll be able to create this detailed persona only when you've spoken to enough people in that market. When you've conducted some market research, right? I think Dilip's question was, how can we make it less costly as an affair to figure out how to find the right segment? Do start with people fit that audience. Start by interviewing them and or share surveys with them and get to know more about them. Only when you have reached some statistical sample size enough, which is at least about 250 surveys, that's when you would be able to create a persona. more on this in tomorrow's session, which we have on market research. So do attend that for if you really want to understand more on how to deep dive into this entire strategy. And yeah, sorry, David, if I interrupted you there.
No, I think that that's actually a good prompt for me to move into the second half, where I can talk a bit more around these things, and we might still have time then for further questions.
Sure,
so
absolutely. Let's pick up there.
I'll be I'm mindful of the time. I am prepared to stay later, but I know some people might not be able to. So we'll finish officially within the hour, and then I'll stay a bit longer. So when we come here to customer-centric marketing, I'm going to talk about three things: customer perspectives, adding value and increasing prices, and then communicating with customers. So again, this is a huge subject, a huge area, but and I could talk about it for hours or whole days, but let me give you the key points which will be useful for you. So customer perspectives. This is a fascinating area because the trouble is that customers are awkward people. They don't do as they're told. They don't behave as we expect them to behave. They don't listen to us. They have their own ideas about what they want. And this makes marketing very, very difficult. If we were selling to robots, it would be so much easier. We could, analyze and program the robots so they wanted exactly what we were selling, and they would listen exactly to us, and everything will be easy. And sometimes we take that attitude that we just have to tell people and they will obey us and buy our stuff. But people are awkward and idiosyncratic, and they have their own views about how they look at the business. So an essential part of any kind of marketing is to understand customer perspectives, to understand how customers see our business, to understand their point of view and what they're buying. And the only way we can understand that is by listening to them. The problem most people have in marketing is they think of it as the process of talking to consumers. That might be literally talking to them. It might be sending messages to them by email or social media and bombarding them with information and telling them what to do. Whereas actually, effective marketing and communication is more about listening. And they say God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, because we should use our ears twice as much. And so we need to listen to customers and understand what they really want. And so then we can improve our strategic marketing by finding the right customers who want what we can deliver, but also maybe adjusting our products and services on the basis of what they really want. So a couple of quick examples. The first is my workshops. And I'm talking here not about online workshops, but the workshops I've done over many years, usually in a hotel room, in a conference center, and people come along, 20, 30 people. And I used to think at the beginning that people came to my workshops to hear the pearls of wisdom that dropped from the mouth of David Parrish. But when I looked at the evaluation forms, they never said that. They said the best thing about the workshop was getting away from the office for a whole day, to get away from my pesky, annoying colleagues so that I can think about my business. They said the best thing about the workshop was meeting other people in similar industries and learning from them. And the tips and tricks you pick up from other people, in the queue for the coffee or in the tea breaks, etc. So I came to realize that what people were buying, or what people really wanted, was like an informative day out with a nice lunch, meeting other people. And I adjusted my workshops accordingly. So there was less of me talking at them and more time for them to talk with themselves, between themselves. And we always had a nice lunch, made sure the parking was easy and everything. Once you realize what customers are buying, which is often not what you think you're selling, once you realize what they're buying, you can accommodate them and do it more easily. And the other example I have to get in, because it's one of my favorite stories, is about the Harley-Davidson company in the United States. And I could ask you, what do Harley-Davidson sell? And you might answer motorbikes, because it's true, they do sell motorbikes, and that's the simple answer. But actually what they sell, and here is a quote from an executive in the company, what we sell at Harley-Davidson is the ability for a 43-year-old accountant to dress in black leathers, ride through small towns, and have people be afraid of him. So what they're selling is the ability for a 43-year-old accountant to be a Hell's Angel for a weekend, to be a bad guy. And so they're selling the whole experience of riding this big, big badass motorbike through small towns like a Hell's Angel. I would say that what they're selling is a solution to a midlife crisis. And once they realize that, then they can price accordingly. If they thought they were in competition with Honda in making motorbikes, they would have to think about pricing, but they're not selling motorbikes really. They're selling a whole experience to people who've got more money than sense, who've got a midlife crisis to solve. And therefore they can, when it comes to pricing, they can think of a number, double it again, and double it again, and there's your price, because they know exactly who they're selling to and what they're selling and what that is worth to their consumers. So we need to understand how customers look at things and what customers are really buying. And if we don't just stop talking for a moment and listen to them, we will never find out. And so by listening to customers, we can do that through surveys and questionnaires, and we can get quantitative data, numbers that add up, and we can talk percentages. But I think, first of all, we should do some qualitative research and just have chats with people. How's it going? Can I come to your office to see how you use my product? Tell me what the problems are in your business right now. And this sort of just general conversations where we can get insights. And then we might get ideas and clues that we can research more precisely. So I think just having the time to stop and listen and understand our customers and their perspectives is crucial. And then coming on to adding value and increasing prices, again, once we listen to customers, we can understand what they really want. So we might sell additional insurance for the product, as well as the product itself. It might be about packaging that we can charge more and get more, add more value. Customers might want us to send our products overseas by express courier. So we might add that. And there are all kinds of extras that people might want that we can add to the basic goods or services for which we can charge more. And a lot of the additional value is about intangible stuff, about being members of a community, about having a brand. Some people go shopping at the cheap supermarket, then bring their shopping home in a bag from an expensive supermarket, so that their next door neighbors think that they're buying from a posh shop. What are people buying? And it's often an intangible thing like kudos, identity, community, and all these things, which is one of the reasons I use an Apple MacBook Pro, because I work with creative people, and if I don't, they look down their noses at me. So having an Apple MacBook is my identification as working in the creative sector. And it's a badge of honor in a way. And I'm also part of a community of other people who use the same computers. So that's one of the reasons I pay more for an Apple computer rather than an ordinary PC. It's not just the product and the utility, but the image it gives me, the membership of a community. And Apple know that, and that's why they charge me more. And then finally, communicating with customers. We've already talked briefly about personas and having a clear idea about who we want to talk with. And I've got some stuff in my website and in my books about the 3 M's of marketing, which I call precision marketing. And that is the 3 M's that we must do in the right order. So the first M is the market, to identify the market, or a precise segment of the market, or even one persona within our target market. And then secondly, decide the message we want to get. This is the second M, the message. What is the precise message? And it might be different for different kinds of customers. So we need to do this precisely. So we decide the message. And then thirdly, the third M is the medium. Which medium do we use to get our message to that particular market? And the point is that we decide the medium last, whereas a lot of people decide the medium first. They discover Instagram, they fall in love with Instagram, they decide they're going to use Instagram before they've decided what the message is or who they're going to communicate to. And that is totally the wrong way around, and it ends in tears. So I'm not against social media, I'm just against inappropriate use of it. And so we might, using the 3 M's, decide that for one product, we've got 3 different markets. These 3 markets use our product differently. Some are young people, so we'll talk about how they use it and the benefits to them, and we'll use social media for them. Some other people who use it are blind people, elderly blind people. So we might not want to use Instagram for them. We might have a different message about the utility and the benefits to them. And then we might devise some leaflets in Braille and distribute them to that community. That's an extreme example, but you see, there is a logic to using the 3 M's. So I will finish my presentation at that point because we're running out of time, but I'm more than happy to answer questions and elaborate further, perhaps in answering the questions before we finish. We might have to finish officially quite soon, and Meda will probably stop the recording and officially it's over, but I can remain online and take further questions and talk further. And as I do that, I'll just mention my marketing book, which I should promote, Chase One Rabbit, Strategic Marketing for Business Success. And you'll find links to it on my website. There are some free extracts from it, and it's available as a paperback, an ebook, which it only costs a few dollars, and an audio book, depending on your preference. So in conclusion, that's my main thoughts and key points about strategic marketing. And I hope that's been useful. Do check out the page of my website, which I think you've had by now in the links, with more information. And at this point, I'll hand back to you, Meda, and say thanks for letting me speak. I hope that's been useful, and I'm going to stay online a bit longer if you want me to.
Absolutely. I thoroughly enjoyed listening to you, David. And I think a lot of people would think likewise, which is why they stayed throughout the session. And thank you for taking us through some wonderful, clear, crisp concepts with some amazing examples. And the Apple MacBook example that you gave was so relevant, and I was smiling throughout. For the others, this session was powered to you by Upgrad, and Upgrad is a leading global online higher education provider. We provide courses in digital marketing, MBA, product management, data science, software development, and machine learning. And we have various forms of helping you upskill in your journey, in your careers, and use us as your lifelong learning partner in the form of doing certifications, even executive programs or master's degrees from us. Do check out our website, upgrad.com, and just look at any course that really fits the purpose in your journey. And I've also shared David's page in the beginning of the session. Do definitely look out at that as well. I am just going to launch an exit poll for the ones of you who have other things to attend to. And thank you so much for staying out throughout the 60 minutes of this session, and would really like to know your feedback. 3 questions very quickly. Help us with some feedback here, and do keep attending many more insights with our grad sessions that we have for you. Okay, I think you can see, David, we've got like so many people saying that you met and you exceeded their expectations. So that's a great feedback to have.
Yeah, of course, it depends what people's expectations were. I think if
so yeah, the outcome that they were expecting from today's session, I think we'll go back to that question, that they were looking at some really relevant examples of strategic marketing across industries, and I think you gave that very wonderfully throughout your talk.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I and David are here to pick up some questions. David, one question I see is from Dilip, who says, how do you measure a brand's strategy success, the success of a brand?
Well, I guess we have, success can only be defined in terms of how we have to define clearly what we mean by success in order to measure success. So, we might say we're going to change our brand because at the moment we're not reaching enough young and middle-aged women in India, and that's our objective. So we're going to change the brand so that we reach more of that target market, and then we can measure whether we achieve that, to measure the success of the brand. So I think we've got to decide what we want the brand to achieve, what we're expecting, what we're planning to do with a brand in order to measure its success. And success itself can be defined in different ways. Is it about reaching a bigger market? Is it about making more profits? Is it about internationalizing the business? So there's a whole host of questions within that question, really. One is, what do we mean by success? What do we want to change? And how can the brand strategy help? And what specifically then are we going to do to get to that point? And only then can we measure whether we did it or not. Otherwise, without that, you're just going to have arguments with your colleagues. You're going to spend a lot of money on a brand, a lot of time and effort, and then you realize in a boardroom, some people say, well, that was a waste of time. We didn't succeed with anything. Other people say, I think it was a marvelous success. And that's a problem then, because they haven't decided together what they're trying to achieve. And one person might think it's a great success because now we have international recognition, because that's what they wanted. But the colleagues on the board, they never wanted international recognition. They wanted to make more money from the home market. So then you get people pulling in different directions. So we need to be clear what we mean by success, and clear within the team and the whole company or organization. It might not be a company, it might be a non-profit, it might be a university or a charity. So we define success, see how we can achieve more of it, talk about different options. Branding might be one of or rebranding might be one of the options. And then we, decide how much we want to invest, what is the expected outcome, and then we measure that outcome. And then we decide, well, actually it wasn't successful because we spent millions of dollars and we only made a 1% improvement in profits, or we achieved something we didn't expect. And we got to be careful then that we don't post-rationalize and change the goalposts retrospectively and say, well, we wanted to internationalize, we didn't achieve that, but we got more young people following our brand, but that was never the objective. So all these are things that happen within companies, and we just need to be super clear what we want and what we expect the brand to achieve, and only then can we decide later whether or not it's been a success.
I couldn't have put it in a better fashion. Thank you for that. One question which I did answer by typing it, but I just wanted to read it out loud. Neetu's question was, how is strategic marketing function positioned in any big organization? Is it, internal, or is it generally outsourced to market research agencies? And my answer to her was, it's usually both, right? They use both internal resources and external resources to speed up and amp up that entire process, because they're constantly at the process of finding newer growth avenues, and that is why this becomes a very integral part of their whole strategy.
Yeah, I would add to that I agree with that, and I think strategic marketing is something that has to come from the top. Again, I talked about the confusion of the marketing word, and strategic marketing doesn't come from the marketing department. It comes from the chief exec, and the board of management, because they are, the captains of the ship. They decide on the general direction they want to go. And to do that, they might use, external consultants to give them information about competition in the market, the needs of the market, investment issues, potential strategic partnerships, all these big things. They might need specialist external help through consultants. But strategic marketing is something that must happen at the top. And because it's about the whole business, the big picture of the business. And it cannot be left to the marketing department. And I have to say that sometimes there is a conflict where, the marketing department is given a task to sell something for which there is no market, or not a big enough market. And then the marketing, the poor people, usually junior people in the marketing department, they get sacked because they didn't manage to sell snow to the Eskimos. But actually it was the mistake was made by the chief exec and the board of management, who decided one day it was a good idea to try to sell snow to the Eskimos. They have to take responsibility. And it makes me quite angry when I see junior people being blamed for not selling what is impossible to sell. And yet, actually, the marketing department is often closer to the customer and can provide good information to the top management in saying, actually, boss, the customers want this. If we change the color, we'll sell more. If we avoid that product, or people are telling us they don't want to buy this because other people are selling it better and cheaper. So we can get information through the marketing department. So strategic marketing is about the big decisions made at the top of the business, maybe with the help of outsiders.
Great. I could answer that question being in the growth strategy function myself. So yeah, I took liberty at answering that. Okay, next question from Jaren is how to safeguard one's own brand from smear campaign launched by competitors in the market. What could be our strategic approach there?
Wow, I mean, this is one of the problems of having social media nowadays. Anybody can say bad things, and sometimes these words, these bad things spread, even if they're not true. So I think the only answer really is to have a good relationship with your customers. Because this, if you think of leaving business aside for a moment, if people start saying bad things about you personally, then your friends might hear this stuff, but they will choose not to believe it because they know you. They know the real you, and they realize that it's lies. So, the more friends we have, the stronger we are. And then in business terms, I think we just need to have a good, honest relationship with our customers. And even it might be that we made a mistake, and then the rivals, the competitors, pick up on it and launch a smear campaign based on that mistake. But if we hold out, if we are open and honest with our customers and say, yeah, we made a mistake, but we fixed it and we actually compensated people, then our true customers will believe us and won't be affected by the smear campaign. So I guess that's another way to distinguish between different kinds of customers: those who will believe these lies and those who won't. And those who won't believe the lies are probably our best customers, who we've provided a good service to, who we talk with frequently, who we see as partners and friends, and they won't believe this stuff. And anybody who does believe it is probably only a fair weather customer at best, probably a very peripheral customer who might choose to believe it because they don't know us very well, and is probably going to go to somewhere else anyway. We're probably going to lose them anyway because we don't have a strong bond with them. So I think in the end, we just have to be open and honest and keep our best customers close to us, and then they won't believe this rubbish.
That's great. And there are so many pluses of having this sort of an honest relationship that they then go on to refer and organically grow your business for you, right? So it's always a good thing, like David said, be honest with them and accept if there was a mistake. I do remember the Nestle Maggie case in India was a big debacle, but yeah, of course, the CEO went live to say that, the matter is being looked into, and they recalled nationwide all the products that were of the same batch that was being claimed. So that just went on to create, of course, they tarnished their brand for a bit, but then they bounced back again. So that's a great example of what David just said. And just adding on to this, the next question is, there's so many, fake products and companies these days just because they get famous with that trending social media campaign, and, and they're very short-lived, so to say. Now, how do you capture the attention of a consumer in the initial stage of your launch? Because it's so difficult, right? Maybe one of the examples that a person gave in the chat was, I am doing an e-commerce business, so it's so I have the giants to compete with. Now, how do I still make my mark and capture the attention of the audience?
Okay, so I think there are two questions. Again, one is strategic marketing and the other one is operational. If you see the giants as your competition, then if that is absolutely true and you're competing directly with the giants, then you're not going to win. So what we need to find is, we need to say, well, yeah, there are giants in my area, but what I can do better than them is this precise area of operations. So I think, first of all, we've got to decide how we can compete with the giants, and probably not by taking them on directly, but by finding something maybe at the edge of their market that we can serve better. It might be that, how can we compete with the giants? Well, sometimes being small is an advantage because we can be more personal and personalized to our customers. Whereas if you deal with a big corporation, you're just a number. Every time you call, you get a different person at the end of the phone. They don't know you personally. They don't really care about you. You're just another number, another customer. Small businesses can have a more personalized service, more tailored service. So first of all, we've got to work out, how do we even have a chance of competing? And that's really about saying, And we know this particular area better than they do, and we can serve certain precise customers better than they can. Maybe a very small number, but that then becomes our market. So, you know, we've got to sort that one out first. Once we've answered that question, we can then start saying, how do we get attention in that particular marketplace? So already we're focused. You know, we might find that we can work really well with small family businesses that run food companies. You know, we might say that they're badly served by the giants. That's an area we know. We think that we've got the right technology or the right offering for them. And so that's going to be our precise market. For example, I mean, I just made that up, obviously.
Yeah.
And then we can, at that point, we can focus on them and forget about everybody else, forget everything else, just focus on them and say, how can we now get noticed by them? And it might be through a trade association. There might be blogs and discussion groups where we can communicate with them. And the other thing I'd say at this point is we might do a calculation to say that the business will be viable when we get 1,000 customers. And people come to me and they say, David, we need initially 500 customers. Help us to get 500. And I can. But I start by saying, let's get one customer. Let's just focus for today on finding just one customer. And this helps us to focus. 500 customers is a bit confusing to think about. Whereas if I say to them, and I say this, and it is a joke, I say, if I put a gun to your head and you have to find one customer this week, otherwise you die, then that does focus the mind somewhat. And then they think, well, actually, I do know somebody in this industry who I met at university, or my uncle has a friend who works. They will be easy to get. And, you know, to save our lives, we think of the easiest, where we have some connection, some relevance. And then that becomes our first customer. And that's a win. That's a magnificent step. From 0 to 1 is the biggest step. And then from there, we can build up. Then we ask this customer, who else do they know would like to buy our services? And we go one by one by one. And in that way, we get to our 500 or our 1,000. And as Meda mentioned earlier, our customers then become our marketing department. They tell us how wonderful we are. They tell us maybe, but they tell, more importantly, they tell other people how wonderful we are. And then they bring in other customers. So again, we're following the love, we're using the natural momentum and giving that extra force so that the word spreads and we then start to dominate that niche. So we can't compete directly with the giants, but we can say in this area that we've chosen where we can serve them better, you know, we are the go-to people.
So I am smiling so brightly just because I wrote the exact same thing in response to Koshi's question in the chat, and I wrote it before you said it. So so we're totally synced.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, great minds think alike, eh? And chat. I can't follow the chat, so I wasn't just. It's not true if you think that I just read out whatever Meda puts in the chat. It's. I thought of it independently as well.
I'm not saying that either, but yeah. So Koshi's question was also how can we use social media for quick success, right? Quick success can be temporary. You can use you can put like lakhs and millions of dollars into your marketing budget, and you will reach a good number of audience. But are you using the right communication? Are you using the right say customer reviews, customer testimonials, right, which will be built with that initial set of people? We call them early adopters, so focus on that. Neetu's question is with regards to your book, does it cover standardized processes, tools, and techniques to help define a marketing strategy?
It's full of examples and stories, actually. And from that, I don't know, it's not really like a textbook where you say this is standardized technique number 4 and you must do X, Y, Z and follow this. It's not that kind of book. But I think that more positively, by reading the stories, understanding the concepts, you can probably devise your own methodologies that suit your own business in an authentic way by reading the book.
Sorry, I think I lost my signal in there for a bit. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're
okay.
fine.
Okay, that wraps up all the questions we had from the Q&A box and the chat. Thank you for being such an amazing speaker and for answering each question so patiently and wonderfully, David. And thank you all for being a lovely audience, for asking such amazing questions and keeping us engaged throughout the session. And we hope to see you all soon. And do write to us at admissions@upgrad.com for any questions we couldn't cover. And do look out for more emails and communication for us for the follow-up sessions we have. Thank you, David.
And it's been a pleasure. Thanks again for inviting me. It's been a pleasure to interact with everybody, answer questions, have a discussion. And I wish all of you every success. Good luck.
Thank you. Good day.